rain was relentless, falling like a curtain of tears from the heavens. His paws, once strong and sure, slipped over the muddy ground as he strained to follow them. His eyes were fixed on the fading silhouette ahead, the one figure that had been his world for nearly 2 decades. The car's engine roared to life, and in a final heart-wrenching moment, it disappeared into the horizon. I can still make it, he thought. I've always been there for him. He won't leave me. He can't. But with every step his legs felt weaker, his breath shallower. The air was thick with a sharp, unfamiliar silence. The world around him seemed to hold its breath, waiting. He tried to push forward, his body refusing to obey. In the distance, the taillights blinked out of sight, and all he could hear was the sound of his own heart breaking, piece by piece. His strength was gone. He collapsed, his once proud body now trembling with defeat. The road he had traveled, the companionship, the years of loyalty, it had all come down to this. And all he could do was watch, helpless. The morning light filtered weakly through the curtains, casting long, pale shadows across the kitchen floor. It was a quiet morning, one that should have felt like any other. But there was something different in the air. The scent of freshly brewed coffee, the soft hum of the refrigerator, the rustle of papers, all the familiar sounds of a morning routine. But for him, it felt like the calm before the storm. He lay on his bed, a patch of sun warming his old, tired body. His fur had lost its youthful sheen, but he had always worn it with pride. Every mark, every scar told a story of love, loyalty, and years of companionship. Today he felt an odd stillness in the air, a tension that he couldn't quite understand, but he felt it deep in his bones. He lifted his head as the sound of footsteps on the stairs reached his ears. The familiar rhythm, it was him. The one who had always been there, the one who had been with him through thick and thin, his best friend, his family, his human. The door creaked open and there he was, standing in the doorway. His figure was framed by the soft light, but there was something in his posture that was different today. His shoulders were tense, his movements slow, almost deliberate. For a moment they simply looked at each other. The man, standing tall with his worn suitcase, and the dog lying on the floor, his tail wagging weakly. His owner bent down, reaching out to scratch behind his ears. He closed his eyes at the touch, savoring the familiar feeling. This was a moment he had lived for. Every morning, every evening, waiting for this simple affection. It had always been enough. But today, as the man's hand lingered on his fur, the dog sensed something else. The touch, the scent, the very air around them. It was all imbued with something heavy. "I'll be back soon, buddy," the man said, his voice low but gentle, as if trying to reassure them both. The dog looked up at him, his heart filled with a quiet plea, a silent question. "Where are you going?" He couldn't voice it, but the question hung in the air between them. But the man didn't answer either break. He stood up and grabbed his coat from the hook. The familiar smell of cologne and leather lingered in the air as the man slipped it on, his movements slow, deliberate. The dog's gaze never left him, his tail now still at his side, an unspoken anxiety growing inside him. The man paused as if to say something, but then just sighed, a deep, heavy sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the unspoken. He reached down, giving the dog one final pat. His eyes softened, a quiet sadness there that hadn't been present before. "Key, I'll be back soon," he repeated, but there was something different in his voice this time. Something that didn't match the familiar comfort of their mornings together. The door opened with a soft creak, and the dog stood up, following him to the doorway. He didn't bark or whine, for he knew better. He had learned long ago that silence spoke louder than anything else. The dog stood at the threshold, watching as his owner stepped outside. The world beyond the door seemed far, cold, and distant. It felt wrong. The man's car was already parked outside, the engine humming faintly. The dog watched as he opened the car door, the sound of metal scraping against the pavement echoing in the stillness. The door shut with a soft thud, and the dog felt his heart skip a beat. He took a step forward, instinctively following, but the man didn't turn around, didn't look back. The engine revved to life, a low growl of power that rumbled through the ground. And just like that, the car began to move, slowly at first, then faster, the distance between them growing with each passing second. The dog's paws shifted restlessly on the ground, his eyes fixed on the retreating vehicle. His breath quickened, the air growing thick with the weight of his confusion and fear. No, this wasn't right. He had always been there, hadn't he? Always waiting at the door, always by his side. How could he leave now? The car picked up speed, and the dog bolted forward, his legs carrying him with a strength he didn't know he still had. His paws hit the gravel with a frantic urgency, the sound of his breath filling the air. But no matter how fast he ran, it wasn't enough. The car kept pulling farther away, leaving him behind. He pushed himself harder, his heart racing with the desperation of someone who couldn't understand why they were being left behind. He was strong, loyal. Wasn't that enough? But the man didn't stop. He didn't even look back. The dog's chest tightened with a crushing weight. His legs were burning, the muscles straining with the effort, but still, he ran. The wind whipped through his fur, the cold biting at his skin, but he didn't care. His body was screaming at him to stop, but he couldn't. He wouldn't stop. Not now. Not when he was this close. He could hear the engine, faint but constant, and his mind clung to it, a lifeline in the storm of confusion and heartbreak. But then, just as suddenly as it had started, the car was gone. The taillights, glowing faintly in the distance, disappeared as the vehicle turned the corner and out of sight. His heart slammed in his chest, the reality of it all crashing down on him like a wave. He stopped, panting heavily, his body trembling from exhaustion and fear. He stood there, alone in the empty driveway, watching the road stretch out before him. The sound of the car's engine had faded into nothingness, leaving only the echo of his own breath. For a long moment, he didn't move. He couldn't. His mind was racing, trying to make sense of what had just happened, trying to understand why. His owner, the one person who had always been there, was now gone, and he didn't know why. The silence around him was deafening, heavy with the weight of unanswered questions. His legs gave way beneath him, and he sank to the ground, his body shaking, not from the cold, but from something deeper, a sorrow he couldn't explain, a loss that consumed him completely. He stayed there for what felt like an eternity, the weight of abandonment settling over him like a blanket of ice. The world around him seemed to go on as if nothing had happened, as if the life he had known for so long had simply ceased to matter. The birds still sang in the trees. The wind still rustled through the leaves, but none of it reached him. Not anymore. He had been left behind. The day crawled by in agonizing silence, each minute longer than the last. The sun, once bright and full of promise, had grown muted, hiding behind an oppressive layer of gray clouds that mirrored the heaviness in the dog's heart. His stomach growled in hunger, but the gnawing emptiness inside him went far deeper than physical hunger. It was a hollow ache that settled in his chest, a feeling that crept up on him slowly and relentlessly, like a slow-burning fire. The house, once filled with the sounds of laughter and the shuffle of everyday life, now felt eerily still. His paws clicked softly against the cold tile floor as he wandered aimlessly from room to room, his movements slow and uncertain. He stopped in front of the door, staring at the spot where his owner's shoes had once been. He could still smell the faint scent of his cologne, a memory lingering in the air, like smoke from a fire that had long since burned out. It wasn't enough to comfort him anymore. It only reminded him of the absence, the void left behind. The sofa, where they had spent so many evenings curled up together, watching TV or reading, now stood abandoned. The cushions were still warm from the heat of their last moments together. The dog padded over to the couch, his body stiff with sorrow. He sniffed the fabric, but it was only the scent of his owner's departure, not the familiarity he so desperately needed. He let out a low whine, a sound that seemed to escape from the deepest part of his soul. He lay down, curling into a ball, his body trembling with uncertainty, with grief. Time seemed to stretch out before him like an endless road, each second pulling him farther away from the life he had known. His mind kept replaying the moment his owner had left, the quiet words that didn't reach his heart. "I'll be back soon." How could he believe those words now? How could he trust in something so fragile when the one person who had always been there was now a distant memory, fading with each passing hour? His eyes drifted to the window. The sky had grown darker, the storm clouds heavy with the threat of rain. It was the kind of day where everything felt on the edge of breaking, the air thick and oppressive as if the world was holding its breath. He stood up slowly, his legs aching with the weight of his own doubt. He had to see him, had to believe that he would come back, just like he always had before. He couldn't sit here in this silence, in this emptiness any longer. He walked to the door, his tail dragging behind him, no longer the proud, wagging appendage it used to be. He paused, listening intently for any sign. any sound of his owner's return. Nothing. Only the distant hum of traffic, the occasional barking of other dogs in the neighborhood, and the whisper of the wind outside. The dog's ears flattened against his head. He pressed his nose to the glass, staring out into the street, watching the cars go by as if they held the answer to the question that burned inside him. Where was he? Why hasn't he come back yet? Every vehicle that passed was a false hope, a cruel reminder that no one was coming to take him back to the world he once knew. Hours turned into an eternity. The sun had set now, casting a dull orange glow through the blinds, but it was far too dim to offer any warmth. The dog remained by the window, his eyes fixed on the empty street, waiting. He heard the sound of the doorbell ringing, a jolt of hope that made him leap to his feet. But when he reached the door, he found only the cold, empty air waiting for him. His tail drooped, his heart sinking once again into the abyss of uncertainty. He tried to comfort himself, but the emptiness inside him was too large to fill. He lay back down by the door, his body stiff and aching from the long hours of waiting. The house was quiet again, the silence stretching over him like a thick blanket, smothering him in its weight. His mind wandered, replaying every moment they had spent together. The walks in the park, the games of fetch, the way his owner would laugh when he did something silly. Why did it have to end this way? The night dragged on, the hours slipping by unnoticed. He didn't eat, didn't drink, didn't even stir from his spot by the door. He couldn't. He was waiting for him, waiting for a sign, waiting for the moment when his owner would walk back through that door. The world outside seemed to continue on, indifferent to his suffering. The wind picked up, rattling the windows, and the first raindrops began to fall, tapping against the glass like soft whispers. The sound was like a lullaby, and it made him close his eyes for a moment, feeling the cool touch of the rain against his fur, imagining that it was his owner's hand, soothing him, telling him that everything would be okay. But when he opened his eyes, the door was still empty. The world outside was still silent, and he was still alone. It was nearly midnight when he heard the engine. At first it was just a distant rumble, a low hum that caught his attention. His ears perked up and his heart skipped a beat. The sound of a car engine, the one sound that could bring him back to life in this moment. He leapt to his feet, his legs trembling but driven by the familiar surge of hope that had carried him through so many moments of uncertainty before. Could it be? Could he be back? He ran to the door, his body stiff but moving with the force of instinct. His breath came in ragged gasps as he pawed at the door, whimpering in excitement. The world seemed to slow down, every second stretching into eternity as he listened to the car's approach. It was him. He could feel it. With a burst of energy, he pushed the door open, and there it was. The familiar shape of the car, the one his owner always drove. His heart surged, and he bolted out the door, his paws flying across the wet pavement, the sound of his nails clicking in the quiet night. The rain had stopped, but the night was cold, the air sharp against his fur. The car was parked at the end of the driveway, just like before. His owner's figure stood by the door, watching him approach. The dog's tail wagged uncontrollably, his whole body trembling with the rush of emotions he couldn't quite comprehend. His owner was here. He had come back. But as the dog ran toward him, the figure turned away, slowly, deliberately, as if everything that had once been between them had been erased. The dog's heart sank, his steps faltering as confusion and fear wrapped around him like a vice. He barked, his voice breaking with the desperation of a creature who didn't understand what was happening. No, wait, please. But the man didn't turn back. The car's engine roared to life, the familiar hum sending a tremor through the dog's body. His legs, already weak from hours of waiting, burned with the effort of the chase. He ran faster now, his body pushing against the limits of what it could endure. But no matter how fast he moved, the car was always ahead, pulling further away, as if he were chasing a dream that could never be caught. He tried with every ounce of strength left in him. But as the car sped off, leaving him behind once again, he knew this was it. The end of the road. The world around him had grown silent again, save for the sound of his own ragged breathing. His legs felt like lead, his chest tight with exhaustion. His body, which had once carried him with grace and strength, now felt foreign, each step a painful reminder of his limits. He had chased the car for what felt like miles, his heart and body screaming for him to stop, but something inside him refused to surrender. He had never been the kind of dog to give up. Not when they ran together, not when they played, not even when the world seemed too heavy to bear. But now, with every step, the world felt as if it were slipping further away. He collapsed onto the cold pavement, his legs buckling beneath him. His body trembled, and the sharp, bitter taste of defeat filled his mouth. He lay there for a long moment, staring at the empty road before him. The car, the one thing that had once held all his hope, was gone. The sound of its engine was nothing more than a faint memory fading into the distance. His eyes slowly closed, the rain beginning to fall again. But this time, it felt different, heavier, colder. I think it was washing away the last traces of everything he had known. He wanted to move. He wanted to get up and run after it again, to push through the pain and the exhaustion and the fear. But he couldn't. His body, which had carried him through nearly 2 decades of life, had finally betrayed him. The strength that had always been his greatest asset was gone, stripped away by the endless chase. All that was left was the overwhelming sense of loss, not just of his owner, but of the world that had once been his. The rain fell harder now, the sound of the drops hitting the ground like a drumbeat that echoed in the emptiness around him. He curled into himself, shivering not from the cold, but from the weight of everything that had led to this moment. His heart felt like it was breaking, piece by piece, each beat a painful reminder that the bond he had shared with his owner was now a thing of the past. He closed his eyes, his body aching with the effort of holding on to something that no longer existed. But in the midst of the darkness, a flicker of something familiar, stirred inside him. A memory, a fleeting image of his owner smiling down at him with love and care. He remembered the way they had played together, the way his owner's hands had always been gentle, always there when he needed him most. He remembered the warmth of his owner's embrace, the sound of his laughter, and the way they had been inseparable. He couldn't let go of that. He couldn't forget the love that had sustained him all these years. No matter how broken he felt, no matter how much the world had changed, he had to hold on to that. His owner hadn't abandoned him. There had to be a reason. There had to be something he was missing. Slowly, painfully, he pushed himself up, his body protesting with every movement. His legs shook beneath him, but he didn't stop. He had come this far. He wasn't going to let this be the end, not when he still had the memory of his owner's love to guide him. The road was empty, the streetlights casting long shadows that stretched out like fingers of the past. The world seemed distant, indifferent, but he wasn't. He couldn't be. Not yet. Not when the fight inside him was still alive. He limped forward, his body aching with each step, but his resolve growing stronger with every movement. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew he couldn't stay here. Not like this. He had to find his owner. He had to make sure that no matter what, he wouldn't give up. The world around him was quiet now, save for the sound of his own heartbeat and the soft thud of his paws against the ground. Each step felt like a battle, but it was a battle he was determined to win. The rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle, and the air was thick with the scent of wet earth and lost dreams. But there was something else in the air now, a sense of purpose, of movement forward, no matter the cost. He stumbled once, his legs giving way beneath him, but he caught himself before he fell. His breath came in ragged gasps, and his muscles burned with the effort, but he kept moving. His heart pounded in his chest, not just from the physical exertion, but from the emotional weight of it all. He was fighting not just for his body, but for the love and loyalty that had defined him. He wasn't going to let it go, not without a fight. The road stretched out before him, dark and empty, but he didn't care. He had been lost once before, and he had found his way back. This time he would find his owner again, no matter what it took. It was hours later when he finally stopped, unable to go any further. His legs, which had carried him so far, were now trembling with exhaustion, and his body had begun to betray him in ways he couldn't ignore. He had pushed through the pain, through the fear, through the uncertainty, but now there was nothing left but the cold night and the quiet emptiness that stretched on forever. The car was gone. His owner was gone. And no matter how hard he searched, no matter how far he ran, the road only led him farther away from everything he had ever known. He stood still, his body heavy with the weight of it all. The rain had stopped, but the world still felt damp and cold, as if it had absorbed all the sorrow he couldn't express. His breath came in shallow bursts. his body trembling not from the cold but from the heartache that seemed to overwhelm him. The street was empty now, the distant hum of traffic a reminder that life continued on, indifferent to the pain of one old dog who had given everything for the love of a human. His owner had once told him, "I'll be back soon," but he wasn't coming back. The words that had once filled him with hope now felt like an empty promise. The bond that had once been so strong had been shattered, leaving only the hollow echo of what was lost. He laid down, his body too tired to keep standing, and closed his eyes. He could still hear the faint sound of his owner's voice in his mind, still feel the warmth of his touch, but it was all fading, slipping away like sand through his fingers. For a long time he lay there, his body still, his heart heavy. He had waited for so long, but now it was time to let go. The love he had felt, the loyalty he had given, would never be forgotten. It would stay with him, even as the world around him moved on. In the end, he wasn't just a dog who had lost his way. He was a creature who had loved with everything he had, and in that love, he had found his purpose. The rain had stopped, the night was still, and he was finally at peace. The moon hung high above, its pale light spilling over the quiet landscape like a silver veil. The world had fallen into a peaceful silence, but for the dog, the night felt endless. His body, now fully drained of energy, had long since stopped fighting the overwhelming exhaustion. Yet his spirit, his heart, still clung to something deeper, something intangible. Even though he had been abandoned, even though the road had grown impossibly long and cold, something deep inside told him to keep going. It wasn't just about the chase anymore. It was about love. It was about the loyalty that had defined him, and the hope that somewhere, somehow, he would be reunited with the one who had given him a purpose. But as he lay in the mud, his body broken, the world around him still seemed so vast, so unyielding. It felt as though the night itself was swallowing him whole, as though the shadows stretched on forever, erasing every trace of his existence. He could barely feel the cold now. His body had grown numb, his fur soaked through with rainwater and dirt, but the pain of loss, the ache of betrayal, still clung to him. He could taste it, sharp and bitter on his tongue. The soft, muffled sound of a door opening broke through the stillness. The dog's ears perked up, a flicker of recognition stirring in his chest. He could hear footsteps. At first they were faint, lost in the distance, but then they grew clearer, stronger. The rhythmic sound of shoes on the pavement was unmistakable. His heart leapt in his chest, a spark of hope flaring in the emptiness that had overtaken him. He forced his tired eyes open, blinking against the darkness. There, in the distance, a figure appeared. He wasn't sure if he was imagining it or if it was real, but the presence, the shape, seemed to be drawing closer, each step bringing with it the possibility of something more. His pulse quickened as he tried to push himself up, his body protesting every movement. The figure was still too far away for him to make out, but he could feel it, this pull towards the light, towards the presence that had always been his anchor. His legs trembled, weak from the journey, but he refused to let them give way again. No matter how much it hurt, no matter how exhausted he was, he had to know. He had to see if this was real. He couldn't die here, not without knowing, not without a final glimpse of the one who had been everything to him. The figure grew closer, the silhouette becoming clearer in the dim light. It was a person, but there was something different about this person. They walked slowly, cautiously, as though unsure of what they would find. The dog's breath came in shallow bursts, each one laced with hope and despair. He took a step forward, then another, the distance between him and the figure growing shorter with each movement. The earth beneath him was soft, and the wet ground made it difficult to move, but he wasn't going to stop now. Finally, the figure stopped. They stood still in the dim light, just a few feet away. The dog's heart thundered in his chest, his breath quickening. He could see the shape more clearly now. It was a man, a familiar figure, one that seemed to shimmer in the fog of his exhaustion and longing. His eyes blurred, but he knew. He recognized the figure even before the man took a step closer, crouching down in front of him. The man's face was full of worry, confusion, and something else, something the dog had almost forgotten: love. The dog whimpered softly, his body shaking with a mixture of relief and disbelief. Was it really him? Could it be? The man reached out a trembling hand, his voice shaking as he whispered the dog's name. "Oh, buddy, is that you?" The dog's tail wagged weakly, the movement slow but deliberate. The familiar sound of his name was all it took. The years of loyalty, of waiting, all the suffering, the pain, the fear, it all collapsed in that one moment, leaving only the bond they shared. The man's hand was warm, and when it gently rested on the dog's head, it felt like home. The dog closed his eyes, his body sinking into the touch. His strength had finally given out, but in this moment, he was at peace. "So sorry," the man whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "I didn't want to leave you. I didn't know what to do." But the dog's heart, despite all the pain, seemed to calm in the presence of his owner. The world had never felt more right. Even as his body began to give in to exhaustion, the love between them remained unbroken, stronger than the distance, stronger than time. The man sat down beside him, gently lifting the dog's head into his lap, stroking his fur with a tenderness that made the dog's heart swell. The man's hands were shaking, but his touch was as loving as ever. He whispered promises, apologies, and words that the dog could no longer understand, but the warmth in his voice was enough. It was enough. The night around them was still, the sound of the rain now just a distant memory. The dog, with his owner by his side, closed his eyes one last time. He had fought hard, and now he could rest. The struggle, the pain, and the heartbreak were over. He had been lost, but now he was found. And in that moment, surrounded by the familiar scent of his owner, he knew that everything would be okay. The moonlight illuminated them both, a silent witness to the final chapter of their story. The dog's heart slowed, and his breath became deeper, more peaceful, as the weight of the world lifted from his weary shoulders. He wasn't alone anymore.